My name is Nate Gautier, and I am a member of Connection Point Church, and I also have the pleasure of being able to serve on the media team here. So, it's amazing what God does in our lives, and I can certainly say that I have been blessed to be alive. And I think I'll talk about a lot of that today, and kind of me and my wife's journey, and what was led us to this point. And where we are today. Right now, we're sitting actually at the Southeast Cancer Center in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and it's eerie to say the least. It's certainly something that I haven't sat in this seat with this little tray that I definitely remember all too well a year ago. Since I was sitting in the patient seat, I'm still a cancer patient. I am, about a year and a half in remission right now from testicular cancer stage 2. There's only 3 stages of testicular cancer, and it was an interesting experience because a lot of things led to where we are. But a little bit about me is that I grew up in a Christian home. My grandfather was a Southern Baptist preacher. My dad was an ordained minister. Not that he did that. He was actually a business executive for a Fortune 500 company for most of his life. So I was raised around God and making church a priority, but I certainly always looked at my own walk and relationship with God and with Jesus as very put lightly. It was a shelf kind of relationship where I would put God or Jesus up on the shelf, and when I needed him, I'd take him down, and that was all my life. So to kind of bring to where we are and why I'm getting this opportunity is because I'm alive, is because in 2018, it was the end of the year. It was very close to Christmas time and Thanksgiving. It was actually October, which is amazing because that's where we're at right now. But I had a shower, and from that shower, I had noticed this little small kind of nodule on my testicle. And initially, because there was no pain to it, I thought it was weird, but I wasn't by any means, too concerned. So as most men do, you wait 2 weeks and you hope it goes away. And when it didn't go away, it really bothered me because I started to panic. I noticed it after another shower, and I remember I was headed towards my office in Perryville, Missouri. I worked in a bank there, and I was a regional manager of an insurance broker at the time. And, it was amazing because I had this window on my office in the bank. And if you could see me on the phone, if a client came in, the lady would walk down the hall to come and get me, but she could see me. She'd be like, "Oh, he's on the phone. I'll come back later." Well, that's really convenient if you're on the phone, but if you're crying, it's not so great. It's a lot more noticeable. So that's what happened. I called my wife, and I was panicking, and I was tensed, and I found this thing, and I have testicular cancer, and I just jumped to the worst conclusion possible. And my wife, she was such a calm to my storm in that moment, and you'll really get to see exactly what I mean by that and how much she was just the stronghold in my life to get me through that situation and then going into what ended up happening. So at this time in 2018, I'm training for my second marathon of the year. I ran my first one in April. My sister wanted to raise some money for St. Jude. She asked me if I would do it with her, and I was like, wow, okay. 2 marathons in 1 year. I felt pretty good about that. And so we're training, and it's going to be on December 1st. And backing up into that panicked and frantic conversation with my wife over the phone, she said, "What can I do?" And I said, "Well, schedule me an appointment." And so she schedules me an appointment, or she tells me who to call, rather. We call St. Francis, and I'll never forget the phone call scheduling that appointment, because it took a month and a half to get in to see the doctor. And as I'm on the phone, I'm thinking they're going to see me like the next day. And so I'm on the phone with the lady, and I remember her saying, "Okay, well, he can't see you until November 28th, and it's going to be, at this time." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "Well, don't you need to know what's wrong?" And I remember her going, "No, he'll see, and he'll take care of it whenever the time comes. Click. And it was just that like shocking feeling of like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm probably going to die because I'm so worried about this thing. And then I wait a month and a half. And within a month and a half, that little nodule grew to 2 sizes, the size of my testicle. Later, come to find out it was a tumor. But I didn't know that yet. So we go to St. Jude down in Memphis. I run the whole 26.2 miles. Wasn't a great race, but I wasn't worried about that. I was there to support my sister. We raised some money for St. Jude. And, it was just strange. So a couple of days before we went to run the marathon, I had that physical that I told you about. And, the doctor was so cool about it. I'll never forget him going, at the end of this physical, I told him, hey, I've got this thing, it's not painful, but it's strange. And I remember him saying, okay. And he goes, how about you go ahead and stand up and drop them? And it was just as cool and as casual as that. And so, he looked, did the exam, and then he said, he walks back over to his computer and he sits down and he goes, anytime there's anything on our privates, we just want to get some pictures. So he sends me over to Cape Radiology that day. I ended up getting pictures, and I had a really, really important moment of leaving the radiology center that day. So the tech, as you know, is not the radiologist. She cannot tell you whether she's seen something good or bad, but what she can do is be a human. And that's what she did. So I remember she was doing the ultrasound down there. And, as we're leaving, there's this long, I don't know if you've ever been to Cape Radiology, but there's this long white hall. And so we're walking down, and it kind of seems like forever. And I remember as she's opening up the double doors for me to leave, she puts the hand on the small of my back and she goes, good luck. And I'll always look back to that time and be so thankful for her honesty, because she knew she saw something, but she couldn't say. So the next day I get the call. This is right before, again, we go to St. Jude Marathon. And I get the call from the doctor. And I don't know about you, but a doctor is not typically the guy to stutter on the phone. And I remember him saying, hey, Nate, so that thing that's down there shouldn't be there, and we want to get you in to see a specialist. And did you say that your marathon was this weekend? And I said, yes. And he goes, okay, well, go ahead and run your race, and then we'll see you first thing on Monday. I need you to go see the specialist, and we got to see what this thing is. So if that's not a way to leave and go run a race and get out of town. So I drive down to Memphis, and I ran the marathon with my sister. And, I come back Monday morning, and at this point I'm just ticked off because I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm drinking a gallon of water a day. I'm 28 years old. It does not make sense for me to be the guy in the potential situation that I was headed into. And I'm in the waiting room, and I'm just filling out my information. I remember my wife sitting next to me. She's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. This is just dumb. I don't know why I'm here. And she did the best thing, because when we got asked into the back of the room to wait for the urologist, we started cracking jokes. I remember her and I cracking jokes about yeah, they're probably gonna have to cut it off, and we're just completely being young and dumb and not knowing how to deal with a situation that's being thrown at us. The urologist walks in. He asked me some questions that to this day shake me to my core, and he said, "Does it hurt?" And I said, "No." And his face became flush white. And it was almost like he'd seen a ghost, he was panicked. And again, these are medical doctors. These are some of the dudes that are just so good at everything they do and polished. But again, they were being humans. They were caring about a situation that may be something very serious. And so after he does the exam, he says, I need you to come in tomorrow morning for an emergency surgery and removal of the testicle. I mean, to tell you the truth, because I was so cocky and unaware of the severity of the situation, I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, like that's not going to work for me. Can we maybe plan in like 2 weeks to do this? And I remember him looking at me straight on, and it's like he sobered me up from those jokes that my wife and I were just telling about the severity of what was happening. And he goes, you don't want to wait on this. So at this point, I'm like at a loss for words. My wife talks to all the nurses and gets me set up for this emergency surgery at 6 a.m. the next morning. And we get a phone call from the doctor. And the doctor says there's a 90% chance that this is cancer. There's a 10% chance it's not. Again, I'm being very, very unaware and very, very selfish to the fact that I am not accepting what's happening. Self-denial was a huge part of me knowing that what was about to happen was about to rock my world. And so we go in. I took a little selfie with my wife. Last 2-ball picture. I know that's not appropriate, but I was young, and I'm still young, but I'm old in heart now. And I went in and they did the removal of the testicle, and then they sent it off for biopsy. You wait about a week. I remember about a week to the day, I was sitting in that same office where I was crying, talking to my wife on the phone, freaking out. And the doctor called me, and I'll never forget like his human way of giving me the worst news possible and mixing it up in a way that was so acceptable for me to receive. And he said, hey, Nate, I just want to let you know, we got the biopsy back from the tumor, and it looks like we've got some testicle cancer. We need to refer to you oncology, and there might be some treatments that you need to do. And you hear those words and you think to yourself, thank goodness it wasn't calloused. And thank goodness it wasn't somebody that just said, hey, here's what it is. Now you got to deal with it. Like, it's called testicular cancer. It's not called testicle cancer. That to me has always meant the world, and that he was just willing to break it down for somebody that was young and dumb and unwilling to accept what was happening. So about the time that we get referred to oncology, it's Christmas. And I took a week off of work from the surgery. Couldn't walk really well, as you can imagine. And, we go see Dr. Moore at the Southeast Cancer Center where we're at right now. And I'll never forget being that young kid that's in marathon shape, sitting across just like we are right now in this same building, and him saying, I think you need to do 20 cycles of chemotherapy, 4 rounds of chemo. And I literally looked up at him, and I sat up in my chair, and I remember kind of puffing my chest out at him and just being like, I can't understand the words that you're saying right now. Like, I literally think that this is ridiculous. This is wild to me. And I wasn't trying to be rude. It was just, I'm in really good shape right now, and I don't know why you're telling me I need to go do chemotherapy. What he knew and what everyone else knew is that I needed to fight for my life. And that was the plan to follow. So I ended up going through a situation where I'm sitting in the chair, and I'm talking to my wife, and I've got my father-in-law in the same room, and they're all like, yep, this is what you need to do. Well, I wasn't ready to accept that I needed to do chemotherapy. To me, I needed to process what was happening, because what a lot of cancer patients will tell you, myself included, is that when you get that heavy of information, it all seems to be flying at you at once. It's like you're living in a movie. That's the only way that I know how to describe it, except you're the main character. You're the person that it's happening to, but you almost step aside so that you can receive what's happening, because it's that mind-boggling. And so, we walk out, and I just remember like my wife walking over to the nurse, and they started scheduling my port surgery, because when you get chemotherapy, it really helps to have a chemo port so that they can administer the drugs. I had one right here. So they actually sliced in once and a second time to take it out. And I couldn't speak. So my wife meets with the nurse and sets up the port surgery. We plan to start chemotherapy, January 7th, 2019. And I, over the course of 3 days, just couldn't move forward. And so I called and I canceled the port surgery. I called the oncologist, Dr. Moore, and I told him, I'm not ready. I can't do this. I need to think about it. I need to process what's happening. And I took a week, and at this point, we're now also trying to preserve if me and my wife are ever going to be having children. So I would have to go up to St. Louis to give a sample so that we can potentially have children someday. And I remember driving down from St. Louis, and as I told you, I worked in Perryville at the time, and I could either take a left and turn off the highway or, back towards Perryville, or I could just keep driving, go back to Jackson. And I called my wife and I said, I'm not okay, and I don't want to go back to work. And she said, okay, well, don't go back to work. What's amazing is that's a pretty simple, hey, you're not feeling it? That's okay. But to me, I was still thinking, hey, I'm going to be working. Even if I have to do chemotherapy, I'll still be okay to work whenever I'm feeling like it. Little did I know that's not true at all. I was too sick. I didn't know how sick I was going to be. And so instead of, going back to work and gritting my teeth through it, I decided I would go out to the Trail of Tears. And I remember this was a pivotal moment for me of speaking to God and telling him exactly how upset with what was happening. So I go out to the Trail of Tears. I sit in one of those picnic tables over there next to the pond, right? Lake Boughton. And I'm crying, and I'm writing in my journal, and I'm screaming at God, and I'm asking him things that I know I shouldn't be, like, why, God? But it was just that moment where I was able to express myself and talk to him in a way that I hadn't before. So I said my piece. I drove home, and a couple of days later, I went out to eat with my father-in-law. I had breakfast, and I said, okay, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to do this. I called and I rescheduled my port surgery. And then I said, okay, when can I start chemotherapy? Well, I got my port surgery done on a Thursday. On January 14th, 2019 is a Monday, and that would be the day that you can start your treatment, start my treatment. Well, January 14th was my birthday. So 29 was a very low birthday for me. In fact, I actually asked my family and friends just not to talk about it. We had a dinner on the weekend. Everything was good. I was 29 now. But on the day of, I wore a Batman shirt and I wore these socks that had capes on the bottom of them just because I was scared out of my mind. If I had known that the chemotherapy would be as bad as it was, I probably would have never signed up for it. I lost all my hair. I became very, very sick, and I sat on the couch for the better part of 6 months. And I remember after my first round of chemo, probably the most impactful, what I call pain on the wall story, was I was still in denial of what was happening. And it was hurting my wife, and it was hurting my family because I just wasn't accepting that what was happening to me was actually happening. And I wasn't being kind. I wasn't being thankful for the care and the love they were showing me. And I remember just laying in our guest room because I had to be isolated even from my wife. We couldn't sleep in the same bed because if I was to sweat and the chemotherapy was to get onto her skin, it could make her sick. If I was to use the restroom, I had to flush it twice. I had to use my own bathroom. And you know me, and that I'm a very social person. I like people. I like talking to people. I like being out and having conversations. And so being a 20-year-old kid at that time and not being able to be around people was hard. It was low. And I'm laying in our guest room, and we have kind of this moth gray paint. And I remember I really hadn't let God in, right? I had that one time I screamed at him out at the Trail of Tears while I looked at the water, and, poor pitiful me type of a moment. And I just remember as I'm laying on the side of the wall and looking at that pain on the wall, I just said, okay, God, you can have it. You can have it all. You can have the anxiety. You can have the nausea. You can have the stress. You can have this anger for what the heck is going on. You can have all of it. And I can't explain to you in any other way but that it felt like God came into the room and just bear hugged me. It was like, okay, you idiot, let's do this together. We got it. And from that moment on, it's not that things were roses and beautiful, but there was something else fighting and advocating for me to not give up, to keep persevering, even though I took this terrible drug called cisplatin. I mean, even to say that word now, especially being here in the cancer center, it's just such an evil word, cisplatin. That drug, I mean, it spit me out, chewed me up, did it over and over again, and threw me into the ground more times than I can count. But through this situation, what I learned is that suffering allowed me to have 12 hours interrupted every single day to spend with God. I'd never had that much time to just work on my relationship with God, sit in my room, turn on my little iPhone, bald as can be, as naked as a baby, and just read passages. I don't know where those videos are, but I just remember being in those moments thinking, man, if I don't make it, maybe somebody will know that I really was trying to be as good as I could about being intentional, about knowing that it's not me and that it's God. Because I don't think that God would have spared my life had I not known that I was realizing that life was not about me. Because it's not. Life's about people. Life's about God. Life's about your family. It's about being more outward than inward. And if you can grasp that, if you can be present with people, which is what cancer taught me to do, is to live in the moment and care more about this particular conversation and this moment in time, because that's all that exists, then you're onto something. And so, being that my wife and I, what I sometimes call, came out on the other side of glory, it taught us that even though we don't think that we're going to be okay, that's okay. One of the things that I will treasure the most is realizing that it's not bad to not be okay. And I always say it like this when I'm having a rough day. It's okay not to be okay. And when you give yourself kind of that amazing moment of knowing that even though my vulnerability feels weak, it's a strength, you're probably going to shake some things up and you're going to help some people. And so what I hope people understand through my story and the story of me and my wife is that we know not all marriages are able to go through something like that and come out stronger. The caretaker doesn't get a break. My wife would have to bathe me. I would have a chemo port hanging out of my body on the weeks of infusion, and you can't shower because it has to be a sterile site and it's going to get soggy. And so they tell you that if you want to bathe, you have to get in the bath. And she would draw me a bath in the morning, help me get into the bathtub, bathe me up, and then send me off for my 8 to 5 chemo job. It's moments like that where I realize that I get real choked up when I talk about her. My wife didn't have to be as kind as she was. And that's why I really tried to do my best to do everything I can intentionally to let that woman know. Thank you. We were young. I got cancer. You can't put those things in the book when you get married. You can't expect them. But she never gave up, even when I was being selfish, even when I denied what was happening. That's a love that transcends. And God's love is bigger. You know, God has an agape love, one that we really can't fathom. And so I hope through the message of what God allowed us to live through that we can help others. Because that's what life really is about, is helping the people around you and thinking about them more than yourself. I hope that this has been helpful to people. And if there's something that we can do in your own situation, if something happens in a diagnosis and a phone call comes that you're not expecting, we know what that feels like. We can't put ourselves in your shoes, but we can try.